So now I'd like to introduce Sing Chen. I'm excited that he's going to share some of his findings on university archive data sets and how they can be used to investigate factors to influence university students' sleep and learning. So now I'm passing it off to you, Sing Chen.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, let me share my slide. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending my thesis defense today. So I will show you my research for the past few years on the effects of class start times and chronotype on sleep and learning in university students. So the goal of this thesis is actually to identify the barriers to healthy sleep and learning in university students. My hope is that the findings can provide evidence to university so that they can implement changes to remove these barriers to improve students' performance and health. So why is sleep so important? Previous studies have found that sleep deprivation and poor sleep quality are associated with poorer school performance in children, adolescents, and university students. Sleep deprivation also impair cognitive processes that are essential for learning, such as attention, working memory, processing speed, memory encoding, and memory consolidation. In addition, inadequate sleep is also associated with poorer well-being and health, which may prevent students from reaching their learning potential. So how is sleep look like in Singapore university students? So here I show you the data from 23,000 Fitbit users. So on the y-axis here is the sleep duration in hours, and on the x-axis here is different age group. The data come from 5 different regions. So here, the university student is at these 2 age group. As you can see, they are actually not having the recommended amount of sleep. So if sleep is so important, why do university students have insufficient sleep? Insufficient sleep can be caused by 2 main reasons. First, they wake up too early in the morning. Early wake-up time is associated with psychosocial factors, such as early school start time and long commute. On the other end, students may have later bedtime, which will shorten their sleep. So in this case, it's more complicated because later bedtime can be associated with biological factors. During development, adolescents will start to accumulate their homeostatic sleep pressure slower throughout their adolescence, and it will reach its peak at around young adulthood, which is when the students enter university. And during university, students will face new social obligations, extracurricular activities, and school workload will also intensify during this period, which may leave them insufficient time to sleep. During university, students usually gain autonomy on how to spend their time, and this may also lead to later bedtime. Yeah. They also have delayed shift in their circadian timing compared to earlier in childhood, so that will cause them to shift towards later chronotype. So chronotype here means their preferred sleep-wake schedule. So out of all these factors, I will focus on early school start time and later chronotype. So how do researchers investigate this factor? So normally researchers will use convenience sampling, which means they will recruit whoever is willing to join their study. And usually these studies are done in a smaller cohort or smaller number of students. However, if you show this kind of result to university, they generally will refuse to change because they may say this is not representative of the whole student population. So in this work, what I did was I have developed scalable methods which can estimate sleep and chronotype in the whole student population. So how I achieve that is I use university archive data. So before I talk about what kind of university archive data that I use, I would like to give a quick introduction on how sleep researchers usually collect sleep-wake data and chronotype data. The most common way to collect sleep-wake data and chronotype data is through surveys. When sleep researchers want continuous and objectively measured data, they will use the actigraphy method, which is issuing these watch-like devices called ActiWatch to the participants. So these devices has a motion sensor and light sensor, which can detect the wrist activity and ambient light. So researchers will use the light level and activity level to analyze sleep. More recently, researchers have also turned to wearables devices such as Fitbit, and this helped them to collect sleep data on a larger scale. So why I put the word actively here is because out of this method, students need to actually actively provide their data either by filling in survey or they need to remember to wear a devices. So is there a way to actually passively collect this data? So previously, researchers has also found that it is possible to use the timestamp on social media posts to reconstruct diurnal profile and to estimate sleep. There are also researchers who use information from apps that users install and use those information to again construct the diurnal profile and estimate sleep. So the so the users actually need to actively install the app, but other than that, they actually don't need to do anything extra. And in university, previous research has found that it is possible to use the lock-in from learning management system to estimate sleep. So in NUS, previously the learning management system is called IVLE. It's a platform where students go to download their lecture note, upload their assignment, or watch lecture record. So students will usually frequently log into the learning management system, which I will call LMS from here on. They'll frequently log into the LMS to obtain the information that they need. So, so currently maybe you don't know as IVLE, now it's called Luminous. Yep, it's the same thing. So how do I access the LMS login data? Is actually through collaboration with the NUS Institute for Applied Learning Sciences and Educational Technology, known as ALSET. So ALSET is the data governor for the ALSET Data Lake, which contains students' information such as campus survey, learning systems, campus IT facilities, mobility data, registrar, admissions, housing, and researchers can also collect their own data and deposit into the ALSET Data Lake. So the data lake is contains all student information. However, the student's identity are de-identified. So actually, the researcher cannot trace back which which data belong to which student. So it's safe. So the objective of this thesis is to assess the university-wide impact of class start times and chronotype on students' sleep and learning. To that end, I've conducted 2 large-scale projects on class start time and chronotype. So without further ado, let me introduce my first project on the effects of class start times on sleep and academic performance. So this project has a manuscript, a preprint on the bioRxiv posted recently. Okay, so when we talk about academic performance, what kind of behaviors are encouraged? So first is attending classes. Attending classes increases students' opportunity to interact with the lecturers and their classmates. It also provides a structured time for students to go through key learning points. So attending classes is among the strongest predictor for academic achievement. And the other good behavior is sleeping well, because sleeping well prepares the student and it optimizes their cognitive performance and readiness to learn. And the most frequent reason why university students decide to skip class is because they feel tired and because they overslept. So the effects of absenteeism, in this case, is not attending classes, and presenteeism, which in this case is feeling sleepy in classes, have negative impact on students' grade, and it may have long-term consequences on students' employment opportunities and their salary. So universities should adopt practices that improve students' attendance rates and their sleep behavior so that they can be successful in the classroom and in the workforce. So when we talk about early school start time, actually most of the research are done in adolescents, in this case, high school students. So again, there are a lot of studies that have been done in high school students which show that early class start times are detrimental for students' sleep and daytime functioning. During this age, students will develop a preference in later timing of sleep. However, they must wake up early in the morning to attend school, which will shorten their sleep. On the other hand, if they attend morning classes, their circadian drive for sleep may also reach its peak. So the combined effect of short sleep and circadian misalignment can lead to daytime sleepiness and impact cognitive performance. So to solve that, researchers have also done a lot of interventions in high school, and they have shown that it is possible to increase the sleep duration and decrease sleepiness among high school students by delaying the start time. However, when it comes to the academic performance and class attendance, there are mixed findings on the benefit of starting school late. It is also unclear if the result from high school can be generalized to universities directly. In universities, students are facing new environmental pressures. It is the first time that many of them are living away from home, and they will encounter new social contexts, demanding coursework and more opportunities for late night socializing. At this time, students will have increased autonomy on how to spend their time, and that might lead to later bedtime. On the part in school, the difference is that in university, the timetable is less structured compared to high school, and this may lead to daily changes in wake-up times and nocturnal sleep duration. And the class attendance in universities is also rarely monitored, so students may decide to skip class in the morning if they are feeling too tired. So to really understand how class start time affect university students, I need to answer the following research question. So first, are morning classes associated with lower class attendance? And are morning classes associated with shorter sleep? And whether the combined effect will have morning classes associated with lower grades. Okay, so for lower class attendance, so in order to understand how the class start time affect class attendance, I need to figure out a way to count the number of students. So one way is to hire an army to guard every single doors in NUS and count how many people enter and leave the room. Although it's possible, but may not be a very good idea. And the biggest issue is that I am unable to track individual students, their class attendance or all their classes throughout the whole semester. So in this digital era, students will bring their laptops or smartphones into the lecture theaters and connect to the university Wi-Fi. In NUS, there are also free Wi-Fi for students to connect to. So previous research has shown that it is possible to use this Wi-Fi connection to estimate the number of students in library and auditorium. In this work, I will adopt this method and use the Wi-Fi connection to estimate class attendance. And to do that, I will access the Wi-Fi connection data governed by NUS ALSET. Okay, so now I am able to calculate how many students connect to Wi-Fi in the room. But the question is, how does this reflect the number of students that are actually in the classroom? So to answer this question, me and my colleagues have emailed hundreds of professors and lecturers, asking them how many students are in your classroom. And I received reply from 53 class sessions across 13 different courses. So here's the result. So on the y-axis here is the class attendance from the lecturers. And on the x-axis here is how many students connected to Wi-Fi in the classroom in the same session, which I call it the Wi-Fi confirmed attendance. So the red line is unity line and the black line is regression line. So here you can see the Wi-Fi confirmed attendance strongly correlated with the class attendance from lecturers. So yes, it's possible to use this method to estimate the number of students. So now I've established this method. I have upskilled the analysis to 337 courses, obtaining class attendance from 23,400 students. So what I did is I tracked every single student for every classes that attend, whether they're connected to Wi-Fi or not in those individual classes, compiled across 3 semesters. So actually my class attendance is not based on the classes, it's actually based on the individual student. So here on the y-axis, you see the individual Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate. And each bar here represents a different class start time. The number at the top that you are seeing here is the number of students who registered a class during this different class start time. So here you will notice that 8 AM classes had the lowest Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate, which is about 15 percentage point lower compared to the other classes. So this low Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate may be caused by student oversleeping and decide to skip class. So in order to verify that, I give active watches to 181 students and track their sleep wake for 7,300 nights. So here is an example of the ActiveWatch data. So for each student, I track 6 weeks of data. So each row represents 1 night of sleep. The x-axis is plotted in a 24-hour period, the clock time. The white bars here are the weekend sleep. The blue bars are the weekday sleep. Light blue are students lying on bed, and red color means they are having classes. So for this particular example, this student has 8 a.m. class, 10 a.m. class, and 12 p.m. class. So you can see here, during the weekday, his bedtime actually doesn't fluctuate very much. But you can see his wake-up time actually changes depending on what time he needs to attend the school the next morning. And sometimes he wakes up too late and he has overslept. So I did this for all the 181 students. And what I observed was that for the morning classes, which are these bars, students have higher frequency of waking up after the start time of the first class compared to afternoon classes. So yes, morning classes are associated with lower class attendance. And from there, then the question becomes, so for those who actually try to attend classes or those who actually overslept, do they have shorter sleep? So to understand the sleep in the university, now I will turn to the LMS data from NUS ALSET to estimate sleep on a university-wide scale. So how to achieve that? So here is an example of a LMS login profile. So what you are looking here is the data from 29,000 students compiled across 5 semesters, and all of them have a first class of the day at 8 a.m. So on the y-axis here is the normalized logins. The higher value means higher frequency of logging in. The x-axis is a clock time plotted in 24-hour period. So the colored line here is the login profile for school days, which has an underlying 24-hour period overlaid by higher activity during class times. And this gray line here is the non-school day login profile in the same group of students. So in this method, we apply a threshold, and if the activity level goes below this threshold, we call it the LMS offset, which is a window for bedtime. And if the activity level goes above this threshold, we call it the LMS onset, which is a window for wake up time. And in between offset and onset is the inactive period. So which represents the windows of sleep. So why I keep using the word windows instead of timing is because LMS signal is awake signal. So when they are logging in, we know they are awake. But if they are not logging in, it's hard to tell whether they are awake or asleep. But if they reduce their login frequency, it's definitely an opportunity for them to sleep. So I repeat this analysis for multiple start times. And in the following slides, I will show analysis that I compared within the same students, compare between their school days and non-school days. So to do that, I have analyzed 17.4 million LMS logins in about 40,000 students. So in this figure, on the y-axis is the difference in LMS offset between school days and non-school days. So if the data point are below this dashed line, means it's earlier on school day compared to non-school day. And the asterisk means statistically significant between school day and non-school day. So each dot represents a start time of the first class of the day. So here you can see that LMS offset is earlier on school day as compared to non-school days for the morning classes. However, there's not much variation among different classes. On the other hand, for LMS onset, students actually have their LMS onset, which means they start to log in the morning, closely tracking the start time of the first class of their day. So here you can see with earlier start time of the day, students have earlier LMS onset as compared to non-school days. And we do not observe such differences in afternoon classes. So this and this will lead to this, which is a shorter LMS inactive period in morning classes as compared to non-school day, which is about 1 hour shorter at 8 a.m. classes. And in the afternoon classes, it's either similar to non-school days or a bit longer than non-school days. So this is data from LMS login, which nicely show this in so many students. However, the question will still remain, how does this reflect the real sleep wake data in NUS students? So to do that again, I turn back to my 181 students actigraphy data. And if you wonder if the result is different from the previous slide, the answer is yes, actually it's different. So here is the result from the actigraphy. Let me go back to the previous slide. Here is the result from the MS login and go back to the actigraphy. So yes, they have very similar pattern. So what you will observe is that for the sleep onset, students have not much variation across different start time. However, for sleep offset, the waking up time, students sleep offset again closely track the start time of their first class, which is earlier on school days as compared to non-school days. And this will lead to shorter nocturnal total sleep time on school days during morning classes as compared to non-school days. And afternoon classes have similar, and students who have their class started in the afternoon have similar nocturnal total sleep time as compared to non-school day. So yes, morning classes are associated with shorter sleep. Okay, so now I've shown that morning classes are bad for class attendance, students have shorter sleep. So how does that translate to their grades? Okay, so in order to answer that question, I have data from 27,000 students and in 130 course grades. Sorry, 130,000 course grades. So this is the distribution of course grades between morning and afternoon classes. So in NUS, the course grades range is between 0 to 5. So here between these two distribution, what I've shown here is that there's actually no difference in the distribution of course grades between morning classes and afternoon classes. So this is actually not very surprising because NUS course grade is known to graded on a curve, which means that the course grades between different courses, the distribution of the course grade between different courses are actually very similar to one another. Then I start to think about, so maybe the real thing that I should investigate is not how the distribution of the course grades between morning and afternoon class. It's because that if students have morning classes, they need to wake up earlier or they just decide to don't come to class. So does that mean if students have more morning classes throughout the week, their grade point average of the whole semester will actually be worse? So that's exactly what I did. So here on the y-axis is the days per week with morning classes throughout the whole semester. So the I set 1 week to have 0 to 5 days of classes. And here you can see that if students don't have any morning classes, they actually have higher grade point average as compared to students who have any number of days per week with morning classes. So yes, morning classes do have an effect on students' grade point average. And to further understand what is the effect on the morning classes on students, I did an effect size analysis. So here, okay, it's a little bit complicated. Let me explain. So the y-axis is cohorts D, and the more negative value means that it has a more negative impact on students' grade point average. And each of these data, this small mountain that you're looking here, means like how many days of morning, the effect of the days of morning classes compared to no morning classes. And the dot itself is the cohorts D, the effect size. The bars are the 95% CI. This small mountain is the sampling error distribution. So what this is showing is that if students have 3 or more days of morning classes compared to having no morning classes, the effect size is minus 0.5 on their grade point average. So what does minus 0.5 mean? It's just a number, right? So when you look back to a research which the author have compared about 200 different educational intervention on students' grade point average, he found that the average effect of those educational intervention is 0.4. So what this means is if students are able to reduce days with morning classes, they can achieve an effect that is similar to many successful interventions. So it's it's quite strong. So here, I show that morning classes are associated with lower grades. So the summary of my project 1 is that morning classes were associated with lower qualified confirmed attendance, and the lowest is at 8 AM. Students are frequently oversleeping for morning classes, and again, the highest frequency is at 8 AM. Students have, despite having so high frequency of oversleeping, students still have sleep loss during morning classes, which again, the highest loss is at 8 a.m., which is about an hour loss of sleep. And lastly, morning classes do have an impact on lowering students' grade point average. So in essence, what students is facing is they need to make two choices if they have early morning classes. They have choice number one, they can decide to sleep more and just skip the class. And choice number two, they can decide to be a good student and sleep less and feel sleepy in class. So the implication of this work is that universities should avoid scheduling early morning classes which are disruptive to students' attendance, sleep, and academic performance. Okay, so that's all for project 1. So here I've shown you that morning classes are bad for students, and this means the general population of the student. So you can imagine if a student actually adopt a later sleep schedule, meaning a later chronotype, this will be worse for them. So that's exactly what I did for my project 2. I investigate the effects of chronotype on academic performance and learning related behaviors. So what is chronotype? So chronotype is the diurnal preference for sleep-wake timing. Some individuals prefer to wake up early and sleep early, and we call them morning type, early type, or luck. And some students prefer later wake up time and later bedtime. And for these students, we call them evening type, late type, or owl. So late type students not only have a later sleep schedule, they are also associated with lower academic performance. So why is your sleep-wake behavior will be associated with your academic performance? Previous research has shown some possible explanations. So first, late type students have shorter sleep, which give rise to daytime sleepiness and impact cognitive performance. Late type students are also associated with poorer well-being, which could impact students' performance at school. And they are also associated with worse learning attributes such as conscientiousness and self-control, which again, this is important for learning. And in addition, late type students may face an issue during morning classes. So previous research has found that late type students has worse academic performance in morning classes, which because again, they have shorter sleep and is a circadian misalignment for their cognitive processes. However, when it comes to afternoon classes, there are two different findings. Some researchers found that late type students actually had similar academic performance as compared to the other chronotype. On the other hand, some researchers actually found that late type students still had worse academic performance compared to other chronotype in afternoon classes. So the discrepancy from these findings may come from the limitations of prior studies. Some studies did not test the interaction between chronotype and time of day. Some studies exclude intermediate type students from the analysis. So what is intermediate type? So other than early type and late type, actually in between there's an intermediate type. And actually most people are intermediate type. So by excluding the general population, the comparison might not be valid. And some studies bin their grades across a large time window. So what does it mean is that if they say late type students have similar performance in afternoon classes, do they actually mean 1 p.m. class, 5 p.m. class, 8 p.m. class? No one knows. And other than that, the results from previous study are based on convenience samples with small numbers of courses or students. And the chronotype from previous study are not verified using objective sleep-wake data. So to really understand how class start time interact with chronotype on students' learning and sleep, I need a way which I can chronotype the whole university students. So that is exactly what I did. So in this pioneer paper by Smart and Schimmer, what they did was they showed that you can actually use the learning management system logins to derive chronotype. And the authors have found that owls, which are late type students, had lower grades in the morning, afternoon, and evening classes. So this is a great method to use. However, there are some knowledge gaps that need to be addressed. So first, are the methods and findings based on MS data reproducible? So this is the only work that uses LMS login data to derive chronotype, and is done in a North American university. So it's unknown if I use this method, can I reproduce the same result in an Asian university with different social culture and education system? And secondly, is the LMS derived chronotype associated with objective measures of sleep-wake behavior? So yes, there's a diurnal profile in the logins, but does that actually mean they are sleeping and waking accordingly? And lastly, the authors did not explain what factors lower academic performance in the MS type student, such as sleep health, maybe their well-being, maybe it's the psychological characteristic, or maybe they just decide to not attend class. So while using this method to chronotype NUS students, I will try to fill in these knowledge gaps. Okay, so my first research questions. Do late type students actually have lower grades only in the morning classes? So again, I will use the NUS LMS data governed by the NUS ALSET. Okay, so how do I derive chronotype from LMS logins? So before that, I need to show that there's actually a diurnal profile in the LMS logins for every single student. So what you saw in project 1 is compiled across 30,000 students. Here, I want to show that it's actually possible to do it in individual students. So in order to achieve that, I need a better quality of data. For better quality of data, I need to set a threshold of the minimum logins on non-school day and school day, which is 24 logins on both non-school days and school days. So here the number of students is lower than what you saw in the project 1. So here I have 33,000 students. And what I'm showing here is the login activity on non-school days and school days. So each row is the same students, and each column is the hourly bin login activity. So red color means higher login activity, and blue color means lower login activity. So here you can see that the blue colors focus at the middle of the night on both school days and non-school days, and that the student login activity are highly concentrated during the daytime. So yes, what I show here is that students actually have a diurnal profile in their login activity on both non-school days and school days. So next, I show you an example of how the data actually look like for individual students. So this student number 1,359, somewhere around here, I guess. And this is his non-school days login profile. So on this plot, the numbers outside are the clock time. The gray and the yellow represent typical nighttime and daytime in Singapore. These bars are the login frequency, with longer bars means higher login frequency, and it's hourly bin. So what you're looking here, this green arrow is the median login phase, which means it's the median of the login activity, and we call it the median login phase. So phase here means a marker of the time. So for this student, his median login phase on non-school day is at 5:30 p.m. And I've did the same thing for school days. So for the same student, his school day median login phase is at 3 p.m. So between these two, I chose the non-school days median login phase to do chronotyping, because it is assumed that students have less obligation to change their wake time and bedtime during non-school days, and this may better reflect their natural sleep-wake habit. Okay, so all the 33,000 students non-school day median login phase is here. So again, the circular histogram. So from this data, what I did is, again, I calculate the population median, which is this purple arrow that you are looking at. And I calculate one standard deviation from this purple arrow, which is this blue arrow and this red arrow. So if the student's non-school day median login phase lies between these two arrows, they are categorized as intermediate type. And if it's starting from this red arrow on this red strip here, they are categorized as early type student. And if lies on this blue strip here, they are categorized as late type students. So here I show you the login profile of the early type students. On the y-axis here is the normalized login. Higher numbers, higher values means higher frequency of logging in. The data is plotted separately for non-school day and school days, and is on a 24-hour period. So here you can see that the non-school day and school day login profiles of early type students are very similar to each other. And here is the intermediate type students. So like I mentioned, most of the population are actually intermediate type students. And here you can see that for the general population, in this case, they have a higher login activity during non-school day evening time as compared to early type. And they also have a wider gap between school day and non-school days login as compared to early type. And for late type students, they actually have a much higher login activity during late evening on non-school days. And the gap between school days and non-school days login in daytime is much wider compared to intermediate type and early type. So yes, it is possible to use LMS login to categorize my chronotype. So now I have 3 different groups of students. I can compare their academic performance. So in subsequent slides, if you see red color means early type, purple color means intermediate type, and blue color means late type. So what I'm showing here is that the late type student had lower grade point average as compared to the other chronotypes. And when I investigated individual class start time, I also observed that late type students had lower grade point average regardless of when the class started. So this particular figure, what I'm showing is on lecture time. Yeah, the class start time here actually means the lecture time. But we all know that in university, you have more than just lectures. So for one course, there's lecture, tutorial, and laboratories, and students can have all the components in the morning or in the afternoon or a mixture of morning and afternoon. So the question now becomes, if evening type students, late type students, they can choose the timing of their courses. If all the courses meeting time are in the afternoon, now would they have similar grade point average as compared to the other chronotype? So that's exactly what I did. So here on the x-axis here is the course meeting time. So AM means all the meeting times are in the morning, PM means all the meeting times are in the afternoon, and mix is a mixture of AM and PM. So here you can see that even when all the course meeting times are in the afternoon, late type students still had lower grade point average as compared to the other chronotypes. So the story doesn't stop here. Now I start to think, maybe it's because these late type students, they still have morning classes. So this is not, so for this result, maybe it's influenced by the fact that they actually still have morning classes, so it reduced their grade point average. So in order to verify that, I did an analysis on days per week with morning classes like I did in project 1. So again, what I show here is how many days per week do students have morning classes separated by different chronotypes. So you can see even when the late type students, they don't have any morning classes throughout the whole semester, they still have lower grade point average. Okay, so for the four panels of figures that I showed, late type students have a learning disadvantage. Now the question becomes why? So to answer that, I need to answer a few research questions. So the first one is, do late type students have later and shorter sleep? Do they have poorer well-being? Do they have worse learning attributes? Or maybe they have lower class attendance? So to answer the question on shorter sleep, later and shorter sleep, I turn to my actigraphy data. So in project 2, now I have more data, I have more data. So here I have 261 students actigraphy data. What I'm showing here is the actigraphy data on non-school day. So each row represents a chronotype. The x-axis is the clock time. So on the left side here is the sleep onset. On the right side here is the sleep offset, or you can think of it as the wake up time. And in the middle, these numbers are the nocturnal sleep duration in hours. So what we are looking here is that late type students have later bedtime or later sleep onset and similar nocturnal total sleep time as compared to the other chronotype on non-school days. However, when it comes to school days, late type students have later bedtime and shorter sleep as compared to the other chronotypes. So now I wonder, how does the class start time actually further affect the sleep duration in late type students. So in an additional analysis, I show that if your first class of the day started in the morning, the late type students have much shorter sleep as compared to the other chronotype. However, if the first class of the day started in the afternoon or evening, the late type students actually had similar nocturnal sleep duration as compared to the other chronotype. So yes, late type students do have later and shorter sleep in the morning classes. So next, I want to investigate the well-being in late type students. So to do that, I sent out surveys to 357 students. And here the result is shown in effect size. So now the effect size is Cliffs delta because the data here, the options here are ordinal. So what I found was that being a late type student has a worse self-rated health, more fatigue and poorer focus as compared to intermediate type students. And I did not observe any difference in well-being between early type students and intermediate type students. So yes, late type students do have poorer well-being. And next, I want to investigate the learning attributes among different chronotypes. And to do that, I assessed the survey sent out by NUS ALSET to 752 students. So from this data here, what I found was that late type students had less metacognitive self-regulation as compared to intermediate type students. So what is this very long term here? It actually means that whether students can direct their learning by planning, monitoring, and evaluating their progress. And again, I did not observe any difference in the learning attributes between early type students and intermediate type students. So yes, late type students do have worse learning attribute. And lastly, on class attendance, I assessed the data from project 1. And because of the filter that I set now, I have a bit lesser student, but it's still at 17,000. So here is the result. Again, the y-axis is the individual Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate. And this is a different class start time. So what you're seeing here is at 8 a.m., all chronotype had the lowest Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate. So this reiterate my point, 8 a.m. is bad for class attendance. And for late type students, they actually have lower Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate at all the lecture start times. So yes, late type students do have lower attendance. Okay, so in summary for my project 2, late type students had worse academic performance at all the class start time, regardless of whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. And late type students had shorter sleep on school days. They have poorer well-being, more specifically poorer self-rated health, more fatigue and poorer focus. They also have lower metacognitive self-regulation, and that had lower Wi-Fi confirmed attendance rate compared to the other chronotypes across all the class start time. So what is the implication of my second project is that universities can actually help these late type students by reducing their morning classes and providing counseling related to sleep behavior, mental health, or strategies for improving self-regulation. Okay, so that's all for my 2 projects. Now I would like to discuss some strengths and novelty of this research. So this project has brought advances in methodologies for sleep and learning analytics. In these 2 projects, I've shown that LMS phenotyping of sleep-wake and chronotype are strongly associated with objectively measured sleep-wake data. And I've also shown that it is possible to use Wi-Fi connections to estimate class attendance. And this work has also brought advances in understanding sleep in undergraduates. In project 1, I've shown that morning classes are bad for attendance, sleep, and academic performance. And in project 2, I've shown that late type students have lower grades, shorter sleep, poorer well-being, lower self-regulation, and more absenteeism. Okay, so this work is great, but there's still some limitations and considerations. So first is the infrastructure and resources. So the raw log of the LMS and the Wi-Fi connections are unstructured. So universities actually have to hire a group of experts to curate and process this data and to establish workflows and data pipelines on how to deliver these data to researchers. So in NUS, there's NUS IT and NUS ALSET. And also universities need to invest in high performance computing resources. So what this means is that because the data is in the unit of millions or maybe even billions, so you can't use an ordinary computer to like process this data. And lastly, it is difficult to conduct large-scale prospective studies due to privacy issues. So like I said, the data are de-identified. So even if we discovered some factors related to sleep, we can't just call up those students and recruit them for intervention study. Yep. So there are some interpretive limitations. So first, LMS logins only confirm wakefulness. We only know they are awake when they're logging. We don't know whether they are awake or they are asleep when they are not logging in. And LMS logins are not useful for estimating daily sleep because students only log in onto the system a few times per day. And lastly, Wi-Fi confirmed connections cannot confirm absences. When students are connected to the Wi-Fi, we know they are in the classroom. If they are not connected, either they are not there or maybe they are there but just don't want to use the Wi-Fi. So some future directions of this work. First, we can use the LMS data to compare the effect of living on campus versus living back at home on student sleep. So living on campus, there are two major effects. One is there are more late night activities and your students won't be there to ask you to sleep early, so you can stay up late. But on the other hand, now they are staying so near to the lecture theater, they can wake up later compared to those who stay at home. So the question now becomes, so if you live on campus, does it actually delay your bedtime? Do students actually decide to delay their wake-up time? And how does it affect their sleep duration? And I can use LMS data to investigate e-learning, especially during this pandemic period. So there are a lot of findings that have shown that students actually gain more sleep by waking up later. So I can also examine the effect of e-learning which are implemented in NUS, comparing the LMS data before pandemic and after pandemic. And deadlines. So for some reasons, lecturers like to give this 2359 deadline, which means the deadline is at midnight. And we wonder whether this midnight deadline actually delays students' bedtime. And lastly, in this work, I've shown that late-night students has worse well-being and like their mood is worse. So in future work, we can have more complete inventories on mental health and investigate whether late-night students have actually are at risk on mental health issue. So in conclusions, actually university have a lot of data and there's a lot of valuable insights from this archive data. So in this work, I have shown that using this archive data, early morning classes are bad for learning. So I've shown that 8 AM classes are bad for class attendance, bad for their sleep, and bad for their academic performance. So universities should really try to rethink whether 8 AM classes is actually a good idea. And also, late-type students are at a learning disadvantage. So while we can't change who they are, but maybe university can provide some help to them. Okay, that's all. Ooh, 48 minutes. So I would like to thank my co-authors on both Project 1 and Project 2, Lynn, Jack, Sam, and Yuvan, Dr. Fang, Prof Chen, and Prof Stroman, and all the staff and students who were in the lab, current and present, for helping to collecting the data. And I would like to thank my PI, Prof Gooley, whom I owe all my success to, and Minnie, the postdoc in the lab, who have provided all the help and advisors for my thesis work. And I thank all the staff and students, current and present, who have helped me or to just have a great time together. And I thank my thesis advisory committee and my thesis defense committee. I would like to thank NUS ALSET and NUS IT. This work is impossible without them. Special thanks to Kevin, whom I sometimes email 20 times per hour just to ask about what does that variable means. So thanks, Kevin, for putting up to me. I would like to thank Xinjing, whom helped me a lot throughout the process by maintaining the analytical platform and keep improving on the platform. I would like to thank the graduate office, Prof Silke, Catherine, and Rosilla for their tender loving care for all the PhD students. And I would like to thank my friends and family for their support throughout this journey. And most importantly, thanks for your attendance. And I'm happy to answer your questions.